Hello, my name is Kevin Bonham, and this is the first in a new series of video tutorials on using Inkscape for scientists. So, if you've seen some of my previous videos, promise I'm going to try not to constantly be referring to them, but I showed how to use Adobe Illustrator for making scientific illustrations, editing figures, and things like that. Since I started making those videos many years ago, I have completely transitioned to using the operating system Linux. And for one thing, it's very hard to get Adobe Illustrator installed on Linux. Also, Adobe Illustrator is really expensive if you don't have access to it through school or something like that. And Inkscape is another vector editing software. So, software that allows you to manipulate vector images the way that Adobe Illustrator does, except Inkscape is completely free and open source. So I've got it installed here on Linux. You can install it on Mac. You can install it on Windows. I'm not going to go into how to install it exactly, but this series of video tutorials is going to show you how to use it to do your scientific illustrations. So when you first open up Inkscape, you can see here I've got version 1.4.2. Doesn't really matter as long as you're past version 1. That should be fine. When you're first open it up, you get this sort of welcome screen, and you can set some different defaults. If you're coming from Adobe Illustrator, you can actually select the Adobe Illustrator key bindings, which, to be honest, they're not like one-to-one, and it's been so long since I used Adobe Illustrator. I've been trying to learn the default Linux or the default Inkscape bindings, which is what I'm going to use now. But if you have those finger motions and key presses ingrained in your head from using Adobe Illustrator, you can use the Illustrator key map. You can also customize basically anything. One of the nice things about free and open source software, oftentimes it's used by power users, and so there's lots of options for customization, most of which we're not going to get into. You can also change the appearance of the icons and things like that, but we're just going to leave all the defaults here. If you go through this, you'll see a page here looking at how you can support. This is a free and open source piece of software, so it's great to support it in various ways if you can. Even just opening bug reports is helpful for an open source project, but of course you can contribute money as well if you have the resources to do so. But we can also skip through here to time to draw, and then we're going to say new document. Okay, for some reason it starts out super zoomed out here, but we can control, click, and zoom to move around. Scrolling up and down, I have a horizontal scroll on my mouse as well. If you need to move around, you can click and hold the space bar and move. For reasons that aren't worth going into, I can't click and hold spacebar. But if you have that ability, because you don't have a fancy keyboard, then you can do that. So in this video, we're just going to talk about making some really basic shapes. So over here on the sidebar, you can see a couple of different icons, including the rectangle tool. And you can also see the keyboard shortcut is there, the letter R in parentheses, the ellipse tool, which also allows you to make circles. The polygon tool. The polygon tool is kind of interesting. You can choose between making shapes that are pentagons or stars, and you can change the number of corners here. You can change for the stars how sort of what the angles between the individual points are. But once you have a tool selected, like we've got the star tool here, we click and drag to make a object. And you can see if I'm still holding the mouse button, can change the size, change the rotation, etc. And with the shape tool, you always end up with a regular shape when you first create it. If you're using the rectangle tool or the circle tool, you can make sort of long and skinny rectangles, but you can also hold keys that allow you to create perfect shapes. So for example, if I click and hold this, and then I hold Control, what you'll see is that I have sort of options to make more regularized shapes. So I can make squares. I can make, this is, I think, a 1x2 dimensions. If I pull it out a little bit more, I can make sort of different levels of regularity here. But that sort of allows us to make more interesting shapes. We can also click and hold the Shift key to change the way that the shape changes oriented to my mouse. So if I'm not holding Shift, you can see I'm sort of dragging that lower right-hand corner. If I hold the Shift key, where I started the square, let me start again. So if you can see, here's the center where I click. and then I drag out. But if I hold Shift, the center will go back to where I started clicking here, and I'm sort of dragging out from the center. I can combine these, so I can do both Shift and Control to make a square that comes out from the center, etc. So being able to use these shapes, these different shape tools, and being able to make them more regularized, being able to change the orientation. So I'm dragging out from the center here. And one thing that's worth noting, if you're coming to this from PowerPoint as opposed to Adobe Illustrator, a feature that both of these pieces of software have in common is that when you are making shapes, rather than going back to selection when you are done creating a shape, you can see here I can just make a bunch of shapes all in a row. And this might be annoying if you're coming from something like PowerPoint. You're used to being able to go and immediately select the tool. But this is actually really powerful for making cartoons, and it gives you a little bit more control. But if you are coming to this for the first time, it can be a little bit confusing because now you don't know how to select an object. Say I want to move this triangle, now I'm just still making the circle tool. So you have to know that you have to actually go back and pick the selector tool, which is what it's called in Inkscape. In Adobe Illustrator, this is also called the selection tool, but the keyboard shortcut is V. The default keyboard shortcut here is S. And once I've got the selection tool, now I can click and move. I can click and drag, change shape. For each of these individual objects, you can see I can move them around or change their shape. I can select multiple objects together, and I can change their shape together. Note that here the keyboard shortcuts also work. So if I don't want to change the ratio, I can hold the Control key, and that allows me to sort of resize these things, keeping their dimensions, their orientation the same. I can also reshape again with Shift, and then I'm going out from the center instead of dragging from the edge. So those keyboard shortcuts, the things that you hold to adjust the behavior of a tool, is pretty similar when I'm creating the tool or if I am moving it around. Another thing that's worth noting is that there are multiple different kinds of selections. So you can see here this selection, I've got these different resize arrows around the edge. If I click again, now I get a shear adjustment here. And again, I can hold Control to make this a little bit more regular. I can hold Shift to change how it shears. Or I can use these rotate handles. Again, holding Control will sort of change the precision at which I'm editing. So this is sort of smooth. This sort of lets me lock into different degrees. I can hold Shift, and then you can see I'm sort of rotating around a pivot point instead of rotating directly. So again, we've got a bunch of different tools here that allow us to have sort of fine-grained control. Another thing to note is that when I'm selecting objects, my selection has to be all the way around the object to select. This is different than Adobe Illustrator, where if you just have a slight overlap, you will select the object. With Inkscape, you have to select all the way around. And actually, there's a way to change this behavior if you want, but by default, that's how it works. So that's it for simple shapes. Again, each of these tutorials I'm hoping to make pretty small, pretty self-contained. So this is how we make easy shapes. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to give these things a little more color, how to adjust the fill and the stroke, etc. So we'll see you in the next one.